So without further ado, Mr. Marc Gilpin.
Well, can you guys hear me? I appreciate Jay and Will inviting me to come up here and mess my pants in front of all of you. They gave me a call basically last night to do this, so no kidding. I've had a week on it. I thought I would, in showing some integration between Cinema 4D and After Effects, first I'd show you the workflow that I was used to doing back at a company that I worked at for a long time. And now that I'm getting into freelance, of course, that workflow has to change depending on the client and what the needs are. So I'm going to, first of all, just want to show you some. I noticed there were a couple of people out here that had Cinema 4D up on their laptops. You do. This guy right here. Sorry I didn't get your name. But has anyone else messed around with Cinema 4D? Does anybody know anything about it? Okay. All right. Well, basically, I just sort of happened upon it. When I got into this industry back in '99, I was an art student up in North Texas, and I knew somebody that worked at the company and got an opportunity to intern there and see if I could contribute to the art department. All it was the engineers and stuff like that, and they needed an art guy on site. From day one, it was, the boss was like, I have a concept, I have no idea how you're going to do it, but I want you to somehow pull it out of my head and give me 6 or 7 versions of it, and you've got 5 or 6 days to do that. And that was how I started learning Photoshop, After Effects, anything that plus, right. So, plus I'm also learning all this proprietary software that the engineers are developing. Well, one day he walks in and they decide that they want to start integrating 3D with the 2D animation. And I'd never even touched a 3D program. So I started going through all the different stuff. This is back when, I don't know, Softimage 3D was probably still $12,000, and all this other crazy stuff. And there was Carrera 3D and just all these everybody was trying to get their niche, for the low-end 3D market or mid-market without having to jump into spending, tens of thousands of dollars on Maya or something like that. Well, I had 2 major problems that I had to solve. One, I had to figure out how to do 3D, and I had weeks. Also, at the time, the company I worked for, all of the content that we delivered we had our own proprietary system for delivering the content, but we used the web. And we had a variety of customers that had, well, not just platforms, but their hardware was fair, midland, to terrible, to latest and greatest, depending on how much money the school district had. So one of the ways that we could make sure that we delivered content that looked good on anybody's screen was we stuck to a web-safe palette. So our product did not do anti-aliasing. You can imagine how bad that looked. And I only had 215 colors, including 1 transparency slot to work with. So they were inking and painting in that web-safe palette. And then I had to somehow figure out how to animate, texture, and render to the exact same palette, because if I didn't, have you guys ever seen when a palette goes wonky and it turns psychedelic there's all these ramping and all the colors are off and people are supposed to have flesh color or like bright purple and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's horrible. So I started playing around with some different packages, and because I didn't know 3D, I didn't really have time to dive in and figure out how are they texturing this so that I can force it to stay web safe. But it was Cinema 4D that I found, one, was extremely intuitive. As an artist, I understood it better than I did Maya, which we all know was made by programmers for programmers, right? And so looking at Maya was just, I was like, whatever, But Cinema 4D, I got right into it. I understood what it was all about. I was able to start modeling, animating, and I'll show you a very complex scene to show you how I solved this web safe palette thing. So there's my very complex scene. But the point is, I was able to, when you're doing materials, you have color, specular, luminance, all that kind of stuff. Basically, with Cinema 4D, the reason I was able to solve this problem so quickly was I could put a web-safe color in the luminance channel, turn off all lights, and that render would come out exactly web-safe for me. So it's almost like a Pantone system. I could choose whatever colors I had to work with, and I would render out TIFF sequences. Everything we did was sequencing, like old school animation, and then we had a proprietary animation software where we'd bring those sequences in, and then, so we didn't render to QuickTime or anything like that. So that was a huge problem to solve for me, so that I could make my stuff look exactly like the setting that it was in. Eventually, one of the brilliant engineers, John Schnurnberger, came up with a way. The program now, the company's doing very well. The program still does not have any aliasing in it. But one of the engineers came up with this awesome trick. And what he does is, we take the TIFFs. TIFFs can be compressed or transferred into a different type of data very, very easily, and you get a lot of information in there. He marries in Photoshop. I don't know if anybody has ever used a PAL file in Photoshop, but basically you have an image, and you can create a color palette file that will approximate what are the most used colors within that image. And what he would do is he would marry the TIFF with the PAL. He would marry that data. He would store it as our own proprietary image file system, and he could shrink like literally a 200K image down to 1K. And it would carry, and basically the PAL file, this is the really cool trick, the PAL file will tell him how to fake the anti-aliasing for the outer contours and the inner contours between all of the colors. So it still doesn't have an anti-aliasing, but then all of a sudden, toward the end of my tenure there, we were able to use 32 million colors without anti-aliasing on our product. So I'm going to show you what I did at iStation. As a multimedia designer, we have curriculum, then we have the art department, then we have the multimedia design department, or the authors, as it's called, and everything throughout the production pipeline. I was very fortunate to work for 12 years with an amazing person, Dan Kinster, former Disney animator. He's done a lot of presentations for short guys and industry giants. He's brilliant. He's a genius. Anyway, so the lead animator, Anthony Coffey, that some of you may know, that works there still, he came up with this concept, and then this will show you how I used Cinema 4D and After Effects to embellish the concept that Anthony would come up with. So hopefully this will work. Can everybody see that? All right, there's no sound on this one. But the idea is this is the physical science interactive module. This is a guy named Justin Time with his robot Wade. And this is basically the opening intro to any time the kids go into that program. Then I had to add my stuff to take it to the next level. So basically cutting the sound effects, the music, the watch that you saw, the robot, all that stuff was done in Cinema 4D. I comped it all in After Effects so that we could get approval that it worked. And then once we did that, then we went back to our old workflow, and this was a screen capture from the actual tool that we use. Then I had to render everything out into TIFFs, and then rebuild all those sequences and composite them in our proprietary compositing system. So I would use After Effects to get me there faster, because it was a lot harder to architect in our own software because that was the software that actually delivered the end product. So that kind of gives you an idea of what we did there and how at that time I was using Cinema 4D and After Effects together. But it was a very limited process. I didn't really ever get to a point where I needed to expand my skills and abilities in how I use Cinema 4D and After Effects, because the production pipeline is almost like a print shop. You know, you don't change machines, and you may still be running off XP or something if that's what the machines require for you to be able to silk screen everything, you know, for a project. So after I got into freelance, I got hooked up with these awesome guys at 900 Pounds of Creative. I don't know if you've heard of the company. Great group of guys, very, very talented. They're really making a mark for themselves, I think, in a lot of different areas. Their specialty is projection. That's really, really what they want to go. Jay knows them really well, and I guess if Stephen Quentin, who did last month's speech, he goes by Q. I guess Stephen had called Jay and said, you know, we're looking to add something to what we're doing for the Perot Museum gala event. They did this projection where they literally took $6 million worth of cameras and projected a 150-foot by 105-foot projection on the side of the Perot Museum, the side that you can see from the freeway that's facing east. And the idea is that they wanted to do a diorama where, since the museum is a cube, they wanted to look like they're tearing down the wall of the museum, and then you look into the inside of the cube and you see all this great stuff that they did. So they needed somebody to help them figure out how to tear that wall down and make it look realistic. So I'm going to show you. So the point I'm showing this to you is, one, the workflow, fortunately, was still the same. I rendered out to ping sequences with transparency built in because they had already set up all their After Effects files, and they just basically needed to drop in my stuff at the end and a simple mask or two on top of that because they had all the layering set up. So, however, I only had a week to come up with all this stuff, and it was all dynamics and everything. So first I'll just quickly show you what I came up with in that week in Cinema 4D. And this is to demonstrate, you know, they had different, I used MoGraph and dynamics for these different transitions.
It'll what? Or none? Oh.
How about turning all off on both sides?
And then I'll do this.
Yeah, cool. All right, good job, guys. All right, so again, one, I was fortunate that their workflow was something I was used to, but was being challenged to do something different. I hadn't played with dynamics that much, and I basically, this is again why Cinema 4D is so awesome. I had to dive in, figure out dynamics, to do something interesting for these guys for this transition, and I had basically 7 days to get it done. All right, so these are all the transitions that I made, and there's no sound or anything. And some of these are tied to energy, geology, all the different, whatever the, I haven't been to the Perot, but they have, you know, specific areas of interest that they.
In other words, this is the symbolism of what Perot's been involved in.
And what the museum is doing.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So for instance, this one right here, this is a MoGraph. And there was you'll see, I'm going to show you a film of the actual final projection, and these transitions will make sense to you then.
The point, though, Mark, that you're talking about is the fact that consistently throughout your career, you've been put in situations where you have to quickly become a problem solver and figure things out. in a short amount of time.
Yes. And Cinema 4D is crucial to being able to do that. It really is. I was talking to Matthew? Mike. Sorry, Mike. And before we got into this, and he's looking to get into 3D, and I heartily suggest that he use Cinema 4D as his first package to get around these concepts, because all the software is very similar now. It's just a different terminology and maybe a little bit different way of getting around, but they're all so pretty much right there at the same level at this point that if you get into Cinema 4D and you master it, you're going to be able to translate that to Softimage or Maya, no problem. But you can't beat the way you can get into Cinema 4D. All right, so and the way you can turn things around. So here's part of the actual projection that was done. I'm just going to go to one more so you guys can see the heartbeat one. See, and there's the heart waiting for you. Okay. I think that's enough. I think they did a fantastic job. It was a beautiful presentation. They ran all night for the gala. Okay, so I just have a couple other things that I want to show you. Now as a freelancer, I'm aspiring to reach another level. I'd like to be at Will's level. And I'd like to use Cinema 4D to get there. And nobody's really heard about Cinema 4D. I think the first time people really understood that Cinema 4D was a package to be reckoned with was when Gladiator came out with Russell Crowe. I don't know if you remember that movie or if you've seen it, but all of the city where he goes to the Colosseum and they're in Rome and the Empire and everything, all of that was done in Cinema 4D. It was all modeled, textured, and rendered in Cinema 4D. And more recently, we have a very, whether you like the movie or not, Prometheus. The head concept designer on Prometheus absolutely, they had to dive into the archives And they built for this particular chair and everything. That was all practically built, but they needed to figure out how to build it. And it was they used Cinema 4D to do all of the spaceship stuff. So this is a concept design that was modeled and rendered in Cinema 4D. You can see the model here. They used this then to actually build the practical set. All of the elements that they used, this is the pod that the engineer is asleep in. The opening shot, we were looking at the primordial Earth. That was actually modeled, rendered in Cinema 4D. And they also conceptualized the new alien at the end in Cinema 4D. So, I'm just like, yeah, we're starting to get some recognition and people are starting to realize this is so cool. Another one that I'll show quickly, which is completely different. Sony had an ad campaign with Skyfall. And I'll just quickly go through. And what they did was, I'm going to show you the Sony commercial that they used. Basically, everything that you see as a display on the Sony devices, the television screens, the handhelds, anything, it's all Cinema 4D. Except for the live action act, obviously. All right, so I don't know about you guys, but that's cool. That is high concept stuff. And if any of you out there are motion graphics designers, you can see that's like cutting edge stuff right there. That is really, really good stuff. Okay, so that's what I'm aspiring to. So now let's get to the part where I'm actually going to show you something. I decided to come up with something very typical. An ident. Now, a lot of times, clients today, they'll want some sort of an ident for their website, or maybe you're doing it for a film, or you're doing it for a cable channel or something like that. Now, what they want you to do is, they don't want you to render something out and then render it out 40 other times, and they have to keep getting a new version from you. What they want you to do is they want you to give them a project that they have the flexibility to change as needed, and they basically can hire you once or twice and then say goodbye, because they have their own people on staff that can work in After Effects. So one of the great things about Cinema 4D and After Effects is the way you can get a lot of flexibility in After Effects by exporting data from Cinema 4D. So here's our simple concept. So what I decided to do was just pretend that it's something I threw together, just pretending that I was going to be doing an industry giants ident. So we're just basically coming down, blowing up a building. Here's an industry giant statue. Let me open this up with QuickTime. Okay, so the challenge here, what I did was, I want to be able to switch out what's on this billboard in any fashion that I want to. And if you'll notice, there are some overlapping elements here. Now what you could do, the old-fashioned way, is you could render out a bunch of different passes. You could have the dynamic boulders on one, the statue on another pass, and you could split all these things out and then relayer them in After Effects. Or you can make life a lot easier, and I basically just rendered this out to a QuickTime movie, exported some 3D data from Cinema 4D, plus a track mat, basically an animated alpha channel, and I will be able to achieve changing out the billboard as many times as I want, and I've only had to render one time out of Cinema 4D. I'll never have to go back to it. So here, the challenge that I set up for myself was, we've got the boulders that come up in front of the billboard, we've got the canned lights, and we've got the transparent plastic-like industry giant statue there. So we've got to figure out how to make sure all of that stuff, when we drop in the JPEG or the video, we've got to make sure that all of that stuff goes over it properly, even though the movie itself, where this is all being rendered, is going to be the bottom layer. Then we add whatever different content we want on top of that. How are we going to then make sure that that bottom layer somehow shows through an upper layer and masks out exactly where we need it to pretend that all this stuff is actually in front of the image that we're going to add in After Effects. So we're going to accomplish this quite easily. So let's go into Cinema 4D. Now, I'm sorry about the screen resolution and everything, guys. It's going to be difficult to see. Okay, so let's just get this to back up. All right, so here's all of the architecture and everything. You can see the dynamics. We end up here. And I also have these lights shining on the billboard. And the lights, I don't know if you noticed when I ran the movie, as daylight kind of goes down and becomes dark, the lights come up on the billboard. So I want to have the flexibility of not only switching out what's on the billboard, but I want to be able to play with the lights as well. And I can do that by exporting the 3D data. So the way we accomplish that is in Cinema 4D, you tag things. I've kind of got a custom setup here so that you can see property settings and stuff. But as you select, one of the great things about Cinema 4D is as you select, everything goes through this attributes manager, and you don't have to have, excuse me if there's any Max fans, but like in Max, you've got like 8 different pop-ups that'll come up so you can get to just one setting. That just drives me nuts. One of the great things about Cinema 4D is you can access any setting that you need through this one attribute manager. What we're going to do is we're going to simply add some specific tags in combination with some render settings so that when we render this out as an After Effects project, we'll have everything we need to stay totally flexible. Okay. So on the billboard, if you noticed in the movie, and I'll just run it here, that billboard is tracking in. And even though it looks sort of flat to us, we are still dealing with position and rotation here as the camera sort of comes around. We're going to want to make sure that whatever we map to that billboard is going to be on the same plane as the billboard so that it lines up perfectly in its angle to the camera. The way we do that, you can right-click on any object and you can access just about everything that you need to do to something in Cinema 4D. We're going to add a tag to that billboard. The tag we're going to add is called an external compositing tag. And what this does is, when you add this tag to an object, basically, when you export it to After Effects, it's going to turn that object into a null layer in After Effects. And it's going to record the position and the rotation of that null layer as an After Effects layer. It's going to translate that position information. We also, over here in the properties, you can, let's say this billboard, if I wanted to track the lights and the pole and all that stuff, I could just simply select children. Anything that's underneath that billboard, all of their information would be exported. You can change the anchor point depending on how you want to play with that. I'm sticking with the center because that's where I want the image to drop in, and then I'll have it centered to the billboard properly. Also, the color here will simply color the After Effects layer so that you know where to look for it in your timeline. Okay, so then we have to think about how we're going to, remember I talked about we want to make sure that whatever image we add in After Effects, we want to make sure that the statue and the boulders and the light cans all come up on top of that image. And the way we do that is we use another type of compositing tag. It's just simply called a compositing tag. Now this tag can be used in a variety of ways. You can use it within Cinema 4D so that you can make sure that, let's say you were rendering out an animation and you wanted to be sure that the anti-aliasing around the contours of your character or your set were perfectly matched up with the colors that you have in, say, a background map. Well, you could have that background in there. You could come over here and say it's simply a compositing background, and that won't actually render out. It'll stay out of the alpha channel, but the anti-aliasing colors will be in the file that actually goes out so that they all line up nicely. You can change the properties of a light so that it actually doesn't show any light. For any of you guys that love lighting, you can have 100 lights in a scene and only 2, you may have just a key and a rim and a fill, but you've got 80 others that are perfectly filling in these little nooks and crannies so you get just that perfect lighting that you want. But you don't want them to create any light. They're creating shadows. And so you can simply tell it to cast shadows and not show any light whatsoever. You can turn off global illumination rays, whatever. What we want is the object buffer. Now the object buffer is how Cinema 4D knows to create an animated alpha channel for the object that you're putting that tag on. You can do up to 12 buffers. You can get very complicated with this. For this example, so I'm going to enable that, and that's going to give it a buffer ID of 1. For every object that you want to make sure you have a separate alpha mat, you've got to assign it a different number so that it will render that out as, I'll show in a second here in render settings. This is in conjunction with multipass, and so it knows to create basically a complete different sequence of files. In our case, everything that I need to be in front of the billboard can go into the same object buffer. I wanted to keep things simplified so we didn't have to worry about too much layering. So if I just simply come over here and get this to move. Well, let's just go down here and do it this way. Okay, so we have an object buffer of 1, and then what I did was I pulled everything out that I wanted to point out to you. I pulled it all out of the hierarchy of the architecture, so it'd be easy to follow. So we've got the billboard, the statue, and the three spotlight lenses that are the 3 can lights that are in front. All right, so all I've got to do is, since I've already got this set to buffer 1, I can just drag this down. See if it'll just let me. Yeah, there it is. It's a heavy scene, so I think that's why we're getting some slowdown here. All right, so they've all got the same compositing tag, and they're all assigned to the same object buffer. Now we need to go over to our render settings to make sure that Cinema 4D knows to use this object buffer and to render it out for our use in After Effects. So if we go over to render settings, and we go into multipass, we definitely want to select multipass. Now I'm not going to. Now multipass is great because that's how you can split out. You guys, specular, color, luminance, all those different things. But since I'm rendering to just a simple QuickTime movie, we don't have to worry about any of that. It's all basically getting buried into the movie, and the flexibility I want is much simpler than that. But what we do need to add is that object buffer to the multipass, and we need to make sure that it has the same group ID. Then when we go to the save settings, which are going to be difficult to see here, what I've got here is we're going to save the movie itself, which is everything that you saw in the demonstration. But now in the multipass, I need to create that separate animated alpha channel. I personally prefer to use Photoshop files. They're relatively small. This isn't a long, it's only a 6-second animation. And I love how After Effects you'll see that it will automatically bring it in as a sequence. And I get a sharp alpha out of them, and it's whatever you want to do. You could even do it as a QuickTime, but it doesn't seem to work as well as far as I'm concerned. The last thing that we want to do is, remember I was talking about how I would like to have the flexibility to do something with the lights. So what we'd have to do is create a compositing project file. So we want to save that. And as you can see, Cinema 4D works with a lot of different compositing software. When we include 3D data, what that's going to do is that's basically going to bring in to After Effects the camera data and the lights, and also the null object that I created for the billboard, so that we can track all of this properly. And all right, so then I'm not going to make you sit here and wait 30 minutes for it to render.
And real quick before you go on, I'll just add this. For those of you that aren't really familiar with why you do multipass, almost everybody's seen Spider-Man, right? Okay. Right. The web that Spider-Man shoots, right? What color is that? It's transparent. How easy it is to see transparent lines, a simple, quick, transparent line on a complex background?
With the lighting correctly, you can show the right shadow and exaggerate the color behind it so that it would
Right. What he was saying is, depending on how the background moving and the shadows and everything else, you're going to want to have to make adjustments to that web so that whatever background is on, it shows up clearly, right? So you know what's going on. That's one of the reasons why in the movie industry, they like to have multiple passes of these things so that the editors can go in and adjust those levels on the different passes. In this case, we don't need that. But for something like transparent web, right, on a very complex background, absolutely necessary.
Well, and actually I made sure that, that's why the statue is transparent, and I'll show you how this object buffer is going to include that transparency, and you're going to be able to see through the statue, even though we're only using one animated alpha pass. So after rendering everything out, this is what you get. So I've got all of my frames for the alpha mask in PSD. I have my original movie that I already showed you guys. And then I have this After Effects compositing file that Cinema 4D creates. Now this is how easy they make it. All you got to do is right-click on that compositing file, tell it to open in After Effects, and it automatically brings everything in for you. We've got our composition, we've got our movie, we got our special pass that we made, the alpha channel, and we have our solid layer. The solid layer is that null object that I was talking about. All right, so hopefully we'll have some room here. So first of all, I'm going to show you the animated alpha mask. Let's see. We're going to get that over here.
Yeah, this is the fun part about doing tutorials and the resolution.
See if you guys can see that. All right, you see how the I basically knocked out everything to grayscale. Can you see those boulders going behind the plastic statue? Watch, you'll see some like. So it's even picking up the boulders behind it. All right, so this is how we're going to be able to put all this stuff in front of whatever we drop onto the billboard. All right, so let's go ahead and open our composition. Wow. Okay, let's see here. All right, that's a little better. Okay, so here is all of the 3D data that came out. We have the camera, and what it does is it exports everything as keyframes. So you can see over here, I'll just point over here, it's kind of nuts. But that's the only way to make sure that it's absolutely accurate with what was coming out of Cinema 4D. I used a sunlight for the city. These are the 3 lights. Let's see. Let me go ahead and move forward here. Okay. So we don't need the sunlight. We can get rid of that because that's been essentially rendered into the file itself. I also had a couple of statue lights where I did a little bit of a key light and a rim light. We don't need either of those, so we can get them out of the way. But as you can see, we have the 3D data for each of those spotlights now, and you can see on the rendered QuickTime movie how they looked in Cinema 4D. And what I did was I purposefully rendered them out at starting out at 50% and only going up to 80%. So I'll just run this, and you can see. You see how it gets dark, and the lights start to come up as it gets darker. But once we put an image on there, what if I didn't do it bright enough? Or what if it was the wrong colors? We have 2 things here. The alpha channel is going to make sure that anything that I want to be in front of the image that I put on the billboard will be, and the 3D data is going to give me the flexibility to change the lights. I can reanimate them, I can change their color, I can change their cone angle, and this billboard is going to be gone, it's going to disappear. And you'll see that what the lights do is they simply act upon whatever image I drag in as a new layer. Okay, also, you might notice this red square here. This is that null object that was created by that external compositing tag. And as we kind of scroll through this, you can see how it stays perfectly with the billboard in the correct plane. Sorry about this, guys. Now I'm going to get to right here. Let's copy that. Position settings. Let's paste that in. Okay, now we can just run that. All right, so it's tracking with the billboard for us, and so are the lights. All right, so the next step. How are we going to get an image onto this billboard? Let's just go ahead and go all the way down to the end here. Now this is really cool. Let's just make a new folder. Put some images in there. Let's see. I don't want you guys to see that yet. Okay. Here's what you do. You have this null layer. All we have to do is select that layer. We go up here and we option click the image, drag it down to that layer, and watch the magic happen. Now, I don't understand what's going on with this part, but for some reason when I drag an image on here, it automatically goes to 0 on its opacity. But we won't have that problem again. If you'll notice now, that image, we have some steps to go here, but the point that I want you to see, I don't know why this is going so slow. Is that it's staying with the billboard. Exactly, that null is making it stick with the billboard, which is great. Okay, so we get to this point. So all I have to do is, since I have that layer selected, I can come in here and I can scale this down to the size of the billboard. And now we've got that tracking in properly. And if you'll notice, the lights are affecting the image. See how the image is getting brighter? Okay. Well, we got a problem here, right? What we've talked about. It's exactly. And the reason for that is, here's the image that we dropped in, and here's the movie it's in front of. So this is where we did the compositing pass. All we have to do is bring this sequence down to above the image, and then we're going to, the image itself, we're going to use what's called a track mat. The track mat gives you various, it's basically alpha or a luminance mat, and in this case we're going to use luminance because we want the image to show through the alpha that we created. So all I have to do is simply select that luma, and now if you'll notice, if I zoom in here, now all of my lights are in front of the JPEG. I'm even seeing transparency from the alpha mask through the statue. And when the boulders are going past, let's do this up to there. Now the boulders are in front of the JPEG as well. So what I've done here is I've rendered this once out of Cinema 4D, and now I've added all this flexibility where I can switch this out as many times as I want. And like Jay was saying, you want to be at Industry Giants. This one says we're guaranteed to score at Industry Giants. We have anything that we want to switch here. I can switch out different images. Once I've set that up, we can put all kinds of different stuff in here.
The idea being, if this was for this year's Industry Giants show, and we wanted to add this information before every speaker, or kind of introduce them, we could have everything defined. And when we have to deliver out the thing, more stupid, just without JPEG, right? Yeah. And clients don't never change their mind, right? That's right.
Well, but the thing is I've got a small net render farm at home, and even this simple little scene with my two computers running, it still took, and this is a very simple setup, it still took almost an hour to render out just 6 seconds because of all the stuff that I've got going, the reflection, the refraction, the GI that I have on the city, all this other stuff. And I dumbed it down as much as possible. I'm not using soft shadows or anything. And, if they wanted 10 different versions of this, my God, and then they have no flexibility to play with it. So, so let's talk about, now that we've substituted that.
Actually,
Sure, yeah.
So then, are you basically applying Maya and the other programs are much more clunkier when you try to do this kind of stuff? It doesn't interact as well?
No, I have nothing. I'm completely, Maya has its great uses, all the other, I haven't done that in Maya. So I don't know. Will would be a better guy to ask.
Yeah, I'll make a kind of comment to that too. That the landscape's kind of changing in terms of what you can do with your different tools. Cinema 4D and After Effects workflow is a little bit more of a, you see this a lot with digital cameras, more like a prosumer version. Whereas, back in the day, with the software cost $12,000, you would have a very elaborate workflow setup. Well, they're becoming more and more accessible. Obviously, there's a lot more people. After Effects is a lot more accessible to people than, say, Nuke or something that's professional high-end studios use. So it's kind of like if you want to get into this world, Cinema 4D and that After Effects that workflow is very easy and accessible kind of pipeline kind of one. So Maya and Nuke and being able to use those tools to do the same thing on a higher end. Those are really cool. So, not to ramble on, but if as you get into this world, you'll learn through the years that it's not so much about the tools you use. You're going to constantly learn some new software. 5 years from now, you're going to learn something different. It's all about knowing what you have your hands on right now and using that to solve the problem that you have today.
And it's from what I hear, there's no better integration between After Effects and Cinema 4D. Because Cinema 4D they're in their 25th year now as a company. I think they got purchased once in that 25 years by a new investment group. They are extremely popular in Europe. They're used all over Europe for all kinds of stuff. It's everywhere. But in breaking into the American market way back when, they had to sort of be a catch-all. And they needed to make themselves more accessible so that they could be inserted in different ways into production pipelines with body paint or other ways of getting themselves used so that people could see the power of what they had to offer that was different. But you're exactly right. I mean, this is for a small-time guy like me who's freelancing. I'm not going to have Nuke, and I can, as simple as this demonstration is, you can get a lot more complex and you can make some incredibly beautiful stuff in Cinema 4D. It has true physical camera rendering, depth of field. I've got a couple ideas for a couple of other tutorials that I could maybe give later this year that would just blow your mind on some of the new stuff that they've been coming out with. Camera calibration tool, really neat stuff. Okay, so on with what we could do with these lights. So I put this last one up here as something that's kind of dark because, in my mind, the lights don't get bright enough. So because we exported all that data, it's a very simple process for me to go in here. And let's just say, for one thing, I don't like the way those two shadows are showing up between the cone angles. So I have access to that now. I can open up that cone angle. I can increase the intensity for each of these lights. And get rid of those shadows and brighten up this whole poster.
So isn't it the 20th Century Fox has the little spotlights going in front of the 3D thing, right? Right.
Yeah, the marquee lights, yeah.
That's exactly what you use some of those.
Right, and I'm going to open up one little thing where I kind of change it a little bit. See, where I've animated the lights a little bit, and I change their colors, and this idea is not limited to static images. You can drop a video in on this as well. So let me switch over to that file.
Yeah, one of the cool things too is, Mark, is that you can actually round trip this back to some 4D. So as you make changes to the light, obviously those lights are affecting other things in the scene, the mold and things like that, and it's already rendered that. So if you make changes in After Effects, you can actually take these changes to the lights on it, go back in the scene 4D, have those attributes automatically applied, re-render it so it affects those non-After Effects, flatten comp, and then bring it right back in, and everything just stays the same. So you can round trip it back.
Yeah, it's just back and forth as many times as you need to. It's brilliant. I love it. Okay, so I just did a slight little change here, just to show how you can use video. And then how, so what I wanted to do was, I'm going to have to scroll all the way back over here. I'm going to turn off these lights. And what I have here is just an abstract video that I'm playing on that billboard. As you can see, the light rays are shining through the transparency of the statue. Everything's working just like a static image. But I thought, okay, so this is all yellow and black. Wouldn't it be interesting if maybe we made it a little bit more dynamic? So I changed the colors on the lights, and I just simply did some so used to having 1920 by 1200. And what I did was, there's a position, orientation, and point of interest on the transform for the 3D data. So all I did was animate the point of interest. So I basically have the lights, like you were saying, Jay. I've got the lights kind of sweeping back and forth, and with different colors, and you'll see the result of how that kind of changes this video since the lights are only affecting what we put into After Effects. So now now it's not just yellow, but we've got this nice sort of color range from pink to orange, green, purple. And that was all just, if I come back over here and select these lights, when I run this again, no, I guess I need to be running that. Okay, there we go. Now you can see those lights just simply animating, kind of changing how the video looks. All right, so I have one last example that I want to show you that is a direct representation of what we've basically gone over here with this very simple tutorial. Real world situation, they did almost exactly the same thing. Last year, Discovery Channel hired a studio out of London. They wanted the exact same thing. As a client, they wanted the flexibility they wanted to change their ident. They wanted it to be 3D and dynamic, but they wanted the flexibility to be able to switch out for what, because they have a million different shows, they wanted to be able to switch out whatever show that they wanted to inject into the After Effects file. So here's a movie of that. And this is basically what we just did today. So there's a real world example where, give the client.
Imagine what the render time would be if you had to do that every time. That's right.
Well, and also we're taking the power of After Effects, which we all know putting that video into that orb is far simpler in After Effects than in Cinema 4D, and getting that to render properly with anti-aliasing and with light refraction within the glass and all that. So it's harnessing which tool is going to give you the easier path and the flexibility to get the job done. So that's all I have to show you today. Just a simple example of how you can shortcut a lot of old school comping and just get right to it and have just a few layers, and you can knock something out in a matter of hours.
Awesome.